What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back. Today's episode is going to be brought to you by Mystery Ranch, built for the mission. And if you don't know the origin story about Mystery Ranch, well, Dana Gleason, the OG of Mystery Ranch itself, well, he went down to South Ops, tied in with a shot crew, and decided to change how wildland firefighters go to work. How did he do that? Well, he just listened to him. Yeah. Hey, what sucks about your packs and how can we make it better? And that's pretty much how we kind of came to the iteration of the pack that's probably on your back, soon to be on your back when you get off the buggy or the engine or the helicopter next. But they make a ton of other load-bearing essentials, anywhere from fire gear, which is probably the best in the game. I mean, best warranty, best built, most comfortable. They got options all the way to like peeling a trophy elk off the side of the hill. They make it all. It's pretty badass. But why do they keep doing this? And why do they keep doing with things like and developing things like the Mystery Ranch Backbone series? Simple. They're in business because they give a shit. And they recognize that the wild and fire community deserves to go to work with the best gear that they can carry a load with. Yeah. So if you want to find out more about Mystery Ranch, go over to www.mysteryranch.com. And while you're at it, go check out the Backbone series. And if you happen to be in the market for some professional development, well, put your name in the hat on the next go around. Now, opportunities for the first half of the year have closed. They closed May 31st. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be opening up a new one here pretty soon. But what that means is that if you put your name in the hat and tell your story and have a compelling one, and if you're chosen, well, boom, there you go. You get $1,000 professional workforce development grant from Mystery Ranch to help pursue your passions and help advance your career. So like I said, go over to www.mysteryranch.com and check it out. The Anchor Point Podcast is also going to be brought to you by our homies over at Hot Shot Brewery. You thought I was going to say Starbucks, didn't you? Nah. Well, Hot Shot Brewery, they make the most kick-ass coffee for the most kick-ass cause, and a portion of the proceeds will always go back to the Wildland Firefighter Foundation. So if you're in the market for some really good coffee or all the tools of the trade to get your morning started off right, or a whole list of Wildland Firefighter themed apparel, then look no further than Hot Shot Brewery. Yeah, it's awesome. And while you're over there, you can actually get some Anchor Point stuff. We kind of have a little deal going where you can get some exclusive Anchor Point merch by going over there. Just search for it and you will find it. But once again, go over to www.hotshotbrewing.com and get all the tools of the trade to start your morning off right, and all the kick-ass coffee for kick-ass causes that you can ever need. The Anchor Point Podcast would like to give a quick little shout out to our buddy Booze over at the ASS movement. And what does that stand for? Well, it stands for the Anti-Surface Shitting Movement. Yeah, I don't know if you have a problem pooper on the crew, but I hate that shit and it needs to stop. Good thing our buddy Booze, who is a artist, a photographer, a entrepreneur, a hell of a firefighter, well, he's got a solution for you. If you want to spread the good word about burying your turds, go over to www.thefirewild.com, where you can check out the ASS movement. And check this out. While you're spreading that poo-bearing propaganda, you can get more of it by just entering in the code AnchorPointAss10 at checkout. That way you get 10% off your order site-wide at the ASS movement. Yeah, so if you're looking for the finest in poo-bearing propaganda, go over to, once again, www.thefirewild.com and check out the ASS movement. And last but not least, the Anchor Point Podcast is, well, they're not sponsored by, they're not brought to you by, but it is one of those close relationships I have with Bethany over there at the American Wildfire Experience. And yeah, I just want to show her some love for as long as I possibly can, because I believe in her cause and I believe in her mission, and she's got some rad stuff going on. And if you don't know what the American Wildfire Experience is, well, they house the Smoky Generation. And I know for a fact a lot of people out there have seen that rolling around. It's pretty freaking awesome. What it is basically a digital storytelling platform telling the story of wildland fire. There's quite literally, there has to be like over 250 of these stories out there now, but it's preserving the legacy of the folks in the field and the story of wildland fire. And some of these stories even date back to the 1940s. It's pretty freaking bitchin'. So if you want a little history lesson, or if you want to sign up for the Smoky Generation grant program, if you got a compelling story and you're telling the story of wildland fire through the lens of a camera, a video camera or a still camera, through a blog, through some animations. There was this one dude out there who made We Move Mountains with Spoons, and it's freaking kick-ass, and they're a Smoky Generation grant recipient. Yeah, sky's the limit. Tell the story. It's freaking awesome. Anyways, if you want to find out more, go over to www.wildfireexperience.org and you can check it all out. Once again, www.wildfireexperience.org. Bethany, you have a kick-ass organization over there. Keep it up.
The views and opinions of this podcast do not reflect the views and opinions of the United States government, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Defense, the Department of Agriculture, the United States Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or any private, municipal, county, or state firefighting organization, any law enforcement agency, any medical provider, or any contractor employed by any federal agency.
All right, ladies, welcome back to another episode of the Anchor Point Podcast. Hope everybody's doing well. Looks like the lower 48 is starting to heat up, but yeah, it's still kind of being domineered. At least the news has been domineered by the whole Canadian wildfire catastrophe that's happening. So yeah, I got my own thoughts about that. But hey, if there's fuel on the ground, eventually it's going to cure. So if it's happening up there, well, it's going to happen down here eventually too. All fuel will dry, and we always have no shortage of starts, whether that be human caused or lightning caused. So buckle up. Yeah, cheatgrass out here in Nevada is pretty damn tall, but we'll see what happens. No one has a crystal ball. But anyways, so today on the show, we're going to be tying in with the the innovation and organizational learning team. Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. And I don't know if anybody's been aware of it, but they're developing this thing called the Meta Review. Now, I will say that it's kind of a shitty name for this, but basically what they're doing is they're taking a lessons learned approach by taking an overall approach, like a meta approach to systematically reviewing past events, looking across multiple incidents, and looking for some themes to identify like things that go wrong, all the way down from like your fatality fires, your injuries, how we perceive our culture with financial incentives, like why the hell are we chasing 1,000-hour overtime seasons? That's a big one. Some societal norms, some cultural norms. Yeah, it goes on and on and on. And it's actually pretty cool. I'm actually pretty pumped to have our good buddy over there by the name of Ben Iverson on the show to kind of explain what it's all about. So if you want to get involved, I'll put some links in the show notes. But with that, I would like to introduce my good friend, Ben Iverson, with the Forest Service Meta Review. Welcome to the Anchor Point. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Anchor Point Podcast. Today on the show, I've got my good friend, Ben Iverson, and he is with the United States Forest Service, and he is performing and putting out all this information that is part of the Meta Review. Now, I don't know if everybody has seen the Meta Review yet, but it is asking some hard questions. Ben, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Good to be here with you today.
Yeah, pleasure to see you. So tell us about yourself.
So I work for a small group within the Forest Service called Innovation and Organizational Learning. And that group is most known for learning reviews for serious accidents, fatality events, chief's level reviews of bad days. I work in the organizational learning part of that group. And right now I'm the only one. We are a new group. We're just, the Meta Review was our first project ever. So we're learning who we are and how we do what we do every day. And the Meta Review is the first thing we put out there for folks to check out and see.
Nice. What about your fire history? I mean, what do you got under your belt? I understand you've done a lot of fire as well, and that's why you're part of this Meta Review, because you speak the language, so to speak. Yeah, so tell us about that.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a winding road. Most of my career I spent on engines in Northern California on the Modoc National Forest, but I've worked for the 5 federal land management agencies. I started out in the Park Service, went to Fish and Wildlife for my permanent. And then I worked with the BLM at NWCG training. So my fire career, operationally, engines, most recently I've been involved in Type 3 incident management teams, but for the most part, starting maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, I made a transition over to training and then ultimately to organizational learning.
Nice. It's another thing too. I think that's really underrated and kind of like not really talked about is like everybody wants to be ops. Everybody wants to be a ground pounder. Everybody wants to run saw. but there's a wide world of opportunities out there, especially in things like you're doing or finance, or, I mean, the sky's really the limit.
Well, and early on in my career, up until about 2009, I was very operations oriented. I thought that was my path, and did some helitack details. I really enjoyed that. I was doing what many of us do, and then a bit of a very bad day in 2009 really had me thinking differently, and I started to try to learn my way through the problem, understanding human factors, like what happened that day and how can I learn my way through it. And over the course of that experience, I met who would ultimately become a couple really important mentors in my career that got me thinking about human factors, system safety. I detailed to IOL before it was IOL. It was just Jim Savelin and Ivan Pupoliti just trying to do what they thought was right. And that's really the evolution of the learning review that took place in conjunction with the FLA evolution as well. Through that process, through a series of details, working on Sierra and Saddleback and TWISP, the Forest Service actually sponsored me to go to pursue a master's degree in human factors in Lund University in Sweden. And that whole process really just got me thinking about things very differently. So now on Type 3 teams, I go as a safety officer, where I try to do that role pretty differently, I think.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Inspiring creative thinking.
Yeah.
Critical thinking.
So, I mean, I don't know if you care to expand on it. I'm not going to pressure you into it, but as far as the incident, the experience in 2009, do you care to expand on that?
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about it quite a bit in a couple different places. It's a little different in that I wasn't there when the thing happened. So Willow Hell Base rappel accident was pivotal for me, for many of us. Tom Maravich, who fell that day, was a Modoc National Forest apprentice. And I remember that day very well, what we were doing that day. But the next day, the phone rang, and it was a good friend, my boss, who said, "Hey, I need you to do something." And I said, "Anything." And he's like, "Well, be careful what you say." And he explained what the need was. And ultimately, it fell to me and a Alaskan National Forest employee to gather up all of Tom's belongings and return them to his parents. And that was back in the day when we were still learning our way through how to handle those kinds of events. And at the time, there were really only two individuals down there, Bob Bell and a family liaison that was assigned by the Modoc. And they were trying to do the best that they could do. But as we've learned over the years, taking somebody home, that is
It's okay.
It's an event. It's a thing. I don't even know how to describe it, but ultimately, me and Seth, the other guy, we kind of looked at each other and like, we're not leaving, we're staying. And so spending that time bringing Tom home, being around his parents, I wasn't Tom's captain. I knew him. We rolled together to Southern California on an assignment, that kind of thing. But it was one of those, being that immersed in the aftermath made that incident incredibly personal. Seeing the effect of on Tom's parents was just something we'll never forget. And coming out of that day, I really feared what the serious accident investigation would say. We'd gotten pretty used to 30-mile Kramer, those things. And I knew that, well, I didn't know. I made a bunch of assumptions as to what the report would say. And what I found was something very different. The human factors analysis of that accident, written by Jim Saveland and Ivan, was so completely different than anything I'd ever seen before. And that led to a phone call, to an interaction, to several meetings. Ultimately, I asked Ivan, how could I learn more? And his answer was, well, interested in the detail. So I went down and took a human performance class with him and Todd Conklin out of Los Alamos National Labs. That was my indoctrination into human performance. And over the course of that next year and the years since, well, I like to think it helped me learn my way through that bad day.
Kind of put some more understanding into the whole process of everything that went down. And this is, you said 2009, this is well before like modern implementation of like CISM and critical incident response, all that stuff. And then serious accident investigations. I mean, that's no joke. It feels like an interrogation at times. And then back in those days when CISMs were going down, like we're just trying to figure it out, they also felt like an investigation.
There's been such an evolution in both over the years. And it's, quite frankly, I think it's a story that's yet to be told. I mean, it's huge. It's huge. What we did then compared to what we do now. And that's not to say we have it figured out. We still have tons of learning to do. I believe that, but it's a heck of a lot better.
Yeah. And, yeah, just asking how you're doing with this later down the road. I mean, did you have the opportunity to like seek help? I mean, did you have the opportunity to seek like therapy, any talk to anybody, or was it still like kind of before the more widespread acceptance of that?
It was an interesting part of the evolution too. I remember, well, and it connects to the meta review in that I hate being a hypocrite. So I would say to my crew, like, hey, if you guys need to talk to somebody, we'll make it happen. And I was advocating for it pretty actively, all the while, zero intention to do it myself. So ultimately, it was a put up or shut up kind of moment. And so called EAP, got set up. Of course, every horror story that you've heard happened. I walked into my first visit, and there was the little table in the corner, the kids' table with the dolls, where the child psychologists worked through horrible days with kids. Mm-hmm. And she had great intentions, but no idea what's much of what we talk about today, first responder trauma, PTSD, all that kind of stuff. And thankfully she acknowledged that. And she said, look, I'll do my best. I'll do my research. We'll engage, or I can refer you to somebody else. And ultimately I did my 5 visits with her, and, but it wasn't the thing. It was really the subsequent years working with Ivan and Jim, teaching that accident in the human performance improvement course we were teaching, at human performance optimization at the academy, being able to really fulfill the promise of making sure that Tom's mom knows that his story, the learning about it would last, that he wouldn't be forgotten. So it was taking that action that really had the greatest impact for me.
It was kind of like a healing process in your own way, just the understanding of it, and kind of like I guess some sense of closure to that as well. I can relate to that with some of my experiences out in the field. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but is that what I'm kind of getting? Yeah, that's what you're kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's a really interesting and kind of sad but cool thing about this is, as we talk to people that get involved in this work, almost all of them have that thing, that day, that person that they have in the back of their minds or in the forefront of their minds. And it is why they do the work. It's not work that you can do. Well, maybe you can. That's judgmental of me to say, but for many of us, it's that history that drives us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing too, is like a lot of our experiences and a lot of our training is, it's unfortunate. It's like you take the 10s and 18s, for instance. I mean, those lessons are learned in blood, unfortunately. But when it comes down to the human factor, like the things that you were talking about right now, I mean, that's something different. It's also learned. It's learned in trauma. It sucks. And like trying to navigate that. I mean, I've got my own experiences, of course, too. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of folks out there that are a little bit later in the game of fire, they all have their experiences as well. And this is the unfortunate thing about being in a dangerous profession. It's not a matter of if, it's when, because over the course of long enough time, a tragedy will happen. Mark my words, it will. Yep. And the whole idea is to, especially with like the things that you're working on, I mean, it's the not make the same mistakes twice. And I think that's a big thing that we need to keep doing. And it's never going to stop.
Indeed. And it's, there's an interaction that took place on the Lessons Learned Center's blog that really kind of encapsulates the purpose behind our work. A contributor to the blog was commenting that, it's sad. These are the lessons already learned, then repeated. And the Lessons Learned Center moderator came back and responded with just a brilliant piece. And they said, new people need to learn the old lessons for the first time. And that's easier said than done. So to a great extent, the meta review goes back to those previous incidents, and we seek to learn from them. The 10 years, 2007 to 2016, that's history, right? It's back then. We have current events to learn through. But by looking back, there's an old saying too that history repeats itself. But I prefer the Mark Twain. History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme.
That's a pretty profound statement
to learn. I love it. I love it because
so accurate,
I am not that captain in 2009, right? You are not the same person that went through your event. And tomorrow we'll go out and interact in a world that is different in every way from today and yesterday and the day before. So there, it all comes back to human performance, and everything is an exercise in human performance.
Absolutely. And now another personal question I have for you is, this chain of events back in 2009 with the rappel incident, I'm just going to make the assumption, I don't know if it's accurate, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it one of the motivating factors to pursue this path down the lessons learned, the Department of Learning, or all of that stuff, the meta review?
I didn't know it at the time. In fact, I often joke with Ivan, especially because he had to teach me to do this. But when people ask me, what do you do? My answer is I ask questions. I ask a lot of questions. And at the time, I wasn't asking questions. I was so insecure in who I was as a firefighter, as a captain, as a human being, there's even a time in my career where I stopped doing after action reviews. I didn't want to hear it, right? I'm not proud of that. And I think I've come a long way since. But over the course of the years, working with Ivan, learning through learning reviews, teaching Tom's accident to people, I realized that how I work through those bad days is through learning. And it's not just the bad days, it's learning from the good days and learning through the bad days. But that emerged over time. I had no idea.
Well, I think it's like
at first it was just like better training. How do I become a great instructor? Because if I can teach this really well, it means that the other side can learn it really well. And then it evolved and evolved and evolved to the point where the meta review and really Ivan's work was about going from individual learning to organizational learning. And I had no idea what that meant when I joined innovation and organizational learning. So through the meta review, I learned what it is to be a learning organization. I had heard our chiefs espouse to being a learning organization, but I had no idea what it meant. I had no idea how to make it happen. And so again, learned my way through that challenge, and it was very much a team effort. I can't take all the credit for the meta review for sure. It began long before I got there, and it will continue long after I'm gone. So it is I think it's important. I really do. And I don't just say it because it's my project.
No, it's wildly important. I mean, there's like the whole old adage of like, if you really want to understand and learn about a subject, try teaching it. And that's what we're doing. We're teaching and learning every day in this organization. And the day that you stop learning about fire or what it means to be a human or a leader or any of the little things, all the little nuances that go into wildland fire, is probably the day you should stop doing this and move on.
Well, and it's a terrifying time, quite honest.
It is.
When I hear our best say things like, I don't have time to read, or I don't have time to learn. We're too busy wearing 6 hats. If we aren't learning, it's back to trial and error,
which opens up a lot of risk. And especially since we have a lot of people that have a lot of slides, and it's no secret. I mean, we've talked about this 1,000 times before, but a lot of the agencies, Forest Service included, I mean, across the federal agencies, a lot of people are leaving, and we're losing that institutional knowledge. And it sucks because now we can't become that learning organization. It's a two-way street. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie. I've learned stuff from rookies. I've learned stuff from 25, 30-year hotshot vets. I've learned something from just about anything, even the most unassuming thing. And if we're losing those quality mentors, whether it be on like a career mentorship or a knowledge of fires knowledge or slideshow kind of mentorship context, I mean, it sucks. It's like, where are we heading? Yep. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, it's kind of hard to say because no one has a crystal ball, but where are we going?
I like the old sayings, and there's an old saying, may you live in interesting times. And we certainly live in interesting times. One of the things that a learning organization ensures is that when people leave, critical knowledge doesn't leave with them. We got a lot of work to do in that arena. Mm-hmm. Now, and I do want to be clear that being a learning organization isn't something that you ever arrive at. It's not like I'm a good person and I will always be a good person. No, you move in and out. Like smart people do dumb stuff all the time. So a learning organization is always trying to figure it out. And as I see good quality people leaving, they're taking a ton of knowledge with them that we haven't captured. And that's scary. That means that the rest of us are going to be learning those old lessons without the benefit of them there to guide us through it. And I'm in an incredibly privileged position. I have a job where I'm paid to learn, I'm paid to think, I'm paid to read. That family liaison from Tom's event became my mentor, and he's now my boss. So we've been together on this crazy learning since then. And I have that benefit of him and that experience. I have the benefit of Ivan's, even though he's retired, we still talk often. He's still teaching me how to be who I'm trying to be inside of this crazy little group that very few have ever even heard of.
I don't assume that there's a lot of folks out there that are privy to what the Office of Learning, Innovation and Learning, Office of Innovation and Learning. There's not a lot of people out there that even knows this stuff exists. A lot of people probably don't know a lot about the meta review either. So, I mean, to expose this to a wider audience and get more data, get more feedback and more lessons learned, I think it's going to be a good thing because you can never stop learning. It's just my opinion. The day, like I said, the day I stop learning about something is the day I'm going to quit it.
Yep. It's been an interesting challenge. I've heard, so the meta review was released just before Thanksgiving of last year. And I'm the first to admit bad timing. There were reasons for it. We needed to get it out. It had been we'd been waiting and waiting and waiting. So as soon as we got the thumbs up, we acted on it and we got it out there. Now, in the meta review, we actually critique email as a form of communication. Everybody is doing their email triage. So I know I don't blame anybody for not knowing about the meta review. And I kind of jokingly ask people to check their deleted folder when they say they've never heard of it because it's in there.
Yeah.
But it got auto-filtered with every other forward, every other thing that didn't appear to mean to matter to me, to them. And there's many things, if I had to do over again with the meta review, probably the top one is the name. The Wildfire meta review doesn't exactly inspire curiosity. It at least it doesn't for me. And many that I've talked to doesn't either. If you have a data bent, if you like numbers, meta review sounds cool.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got a lot to learn on how to get this into the hands of people that we need to use it. We spent a boatload of time on creating products that we hope will be useful. But if they never open that email, if they never attend a webinar, they'll never see it. And
that is compounded with people
tough.
Being busy, like just doing stuff. But
yes,
it's another thing too. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I mean, a lot of people are guilty of this. I guarantee you JLIF is even guilty of this, but how many all call, all forest, all agency emails that just like an all call email that goes out that you're just like, read, didn't even read it. You just marked it as read, check it off your list. So it's not sitting there in your inbox. But how many times does that happen? For me, it happened all the time. But then again, I didn't care. Stuff that didn't pertain to me. Right. So that the name is fine. I think this is fine. I mean, but I think it's just the explanation and like kind of putting out the word. I think that is that, and also an understanding. It's like we kind of just jumped right into some personal experiences and like meta review. We talked about the topics, the individual like little juicy chunks so far. So let's get down to the brass tacks of it. What is the meta review?
What I like to say is that the meta review started at TWISP, but it's not about TWISP. Mm-hmm. So as a safety action plan item for the TWISP River Fire Fatalities and Entrapments Learning Review, talk about a mouthful of a name, it tasks the Forest Service with conducting a meta review. And that was one of the first things I had to learn. Is like, what is a meta review? So if the TWISP River Learning Review is a singular event, a meta review takes a bunch of them. So what we did in the meta review is we took 2007 to 2016 If the event took place on Forest Service jurisdiction or it involved a Forest Service employee, it became part of the review. So something like 273 incidents were reviewed. I could be off on that number. I apologize if I am. But the idea being is if you learn some things from singular events, what can you learn from sequences of events? What are the trends? What are the commonalities? What are the differences? And it would be really easy to say, and we actually did. It started out as a quantitative analysis where we just asked how many hit-by events do we have? How many motor vehicle accidents do we have? How are our people getting hurt or killed? And we generated a report, and it's called the hit-by report because it highlighted how often our folks get hit by rocks and trees. And that generated it. We generated it, then put it out there. It generated some dialogue. It got people thinking a little bit about the work that we ask our people to do. But it really didn't, it didn't fulfill the hope. And the challenge with this is, well, what is the hope? And I think we're still trying to figure that out. But what happened next was it evolved. It went from the numbers to the stories, the experiences of wildland firefighters. Anybody that is part of the wildland fire system could contribute to this. And so IOL did a series of focus groups that focused on 5 topic areas. How does our interactions with society at large impact wildland fire safety and risk? How does our knowledge of ecology and fire's role in the ecosystem impact how we engage with it? And that series of 5 focus groups was incredible. The lived experiences of the people doing the work added the story to the data. And at that point, and this is really when myself and 3 others were brought on board, Lakota Burwell, Wendy McCartney, and Craig Conley, we were all brought on board to take this data, this qualitative stories from focus groups and these numbers and do something with it. And Sarah Brown, an amazing individual, an amazing mentor in this, she gave us the most important and most unreasonable leader's intent that I've ever received.
Oh, I got to hear this.
She said, yeah, it was great. She said, no matter what you do, don't just write another report that no one ever reads.
Nailed it. Because
Right?
the last thing I wanted to hear about an incident, it's not as captivating. I mean, it doesn't provide the human human complexities. Sure. Right there. You can have all the data in the world and the devil's in the details, right? Sure. Makes sense. But if you don't throw that human component into it and you don't provide any context to it, then what's the point?
Yep. Ariana Huffington, the founder of Huffington Post, believes, and I've adopted this as my core belief with learning too, is that people learn best by combining 2 things: data and story.
100%.
We had no idea that that's what we were doing, but that's what we were doing.
And now it's all put out there with the meta review.
Yep.
Huh.
Yep. Data plus story. And we were able to, well, it's kind of a funny evolution because no matter how great Sarah's leader's intent was, none of us knew what to do with it. So we started writing a report. And it was actually on a road trip with my wife. Whoever's driving gets to control the radio, right? And I'm driving and I love audiobooks, and she hates them. And I put on David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me.
Great book.
The book is one thing, but the audiobook has several cool things in it. So if you haven't listened to it, check it out. But the ghostwriter reads it, and then they do a podcast style interview between Goggins and the writer. Each chapter has a challenge. And as we were driving across the country, I'm looking at my wife and she's digging it. She's enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if this is working here, maybe we need to do an audiobook. Maybe we need to have chapter challenges. And maybe we need to do a podcast style interview at the end of each chapter. We didn't end up doing that at the time, mainly because I have no idea how to do what you do. But here we are.
I'll tell you everything, right? I know.
It's kind of cool. Exactly. So that's really what the work became, is figuring out what is different. What can we do differently? And the way that it's structured, how each chapter is a standalone chapter. If you only have 15 minutes, just go to chapter 8 and read that chapter, right? You don't need to start at page 1 and end at page 73, whatever it is. But find the topic that interests you. So if it's the quest for 1,000 hours of overtime, money as an incentive to risk, go to that chapter and read it and do the chapter challenge with your crew. If it's, is safety first a myth? Ask yourself, to you, is safety first? And if it's not, what does that mean? And if it is, how do you live it? Each chapter has that kind of thing to it. It's short, it's consumable. It has a chapter challenge that helps you talk about it with your group. And ultimately, the best feedback we've gotten is with the audiobook version. People are incredibly thankful of that. The chapter challenges have been used in fire refreshers and in regional leadership team meetings and forest leadership team meetings. In the interagency community, I've had a couple other champions, like Eric Franstead with the Risk Management Committee has picked it up and had it as a dialogue with the NWCG Risk Management Committee. So I can't say that everyone's read it, but people have read it. People have picked it up, and that's super cool to see.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm on the website right now. I'm like, that's why I keep looking over to my other screen here. And I'm like looking at all the like different ways you have this kind of produced. And there's a lot of different ways to digest this information.
Yep.
And it kicks ass. It's actually, there's some really good stuff. I kind of went down a rabbit hole last night and I was digging into it on my cell phone, which is, kind of hard to read, but maybe that's just because I have terrible eyesight and I'm getting terrible eyesight as I age. But yeah, you have a bunch of different ways to digest this. And just like you were saying with the book, with David Goggins' book, it's the same thing with Jocko's books. Like if you listen to it on audio, there's a little bit more like of a feel to it, right? Like there's explosions in the background as Leaf or Jocko is reading the chapter, and it adds so much. So when you have all these varieties, you can even follow along. I mean, you could pull up the interactive PDFs or the individual chapter PDFs. You can pull the story maps, and then you can like follow along with the audiobook version of that chapter. And that's pretty awesome because now it's adding more complexity to it. And it's a different way of understanding. It's like people that are tactile learners or auditory learners or visual learners. You have everything out there. You can do it all. And there's some good stuff in there. I'm not going to lie. There's some great stuff.
Sometimes I get down on myself like talking about an audiobook as an innovation. Like, is that really an innovation? They've been around forever. And through my learning, I learned that creativity is doing something new. or coming up with something new. But innovation is doing something new, bringing something out there into your organization or your company and doing it. And we weren't doing audiobooks. The Eldorado Fire Learning Review has an audiobook. It's in our future. I trust that we will see more and more audiobooks. Story maps are incredibly engaging, and you're seeing them all over the place.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And still there are readers. And for you, we've got the interactive PDF.
No, I dig it. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of quality topics in there. And I kind of want to like dive into some of them. I mean, there's, what is it, 14 chapters? Where'd it go? Where is it at?
Yeah, the final chapter is pretty short, but yep.
But yeah, there's some hard questions that we always talk about on this, like on the line. Like this is like mop up talk, but it's presented in like a very scientific form. It's actually like combining the data, the science, and the anecdotal storytelling process all into one. So it's very powerful. Some of it's very moving. It makes you think, makes you kind of question like some of your own actions and how to be a better leader or a better firefighter and all that stuff, or even question some of the things with even policy that we pursue. Like chapter 11, for instance, the quest for 1,000 hours of overtime is money and an incentive to risk. I can't tell you how many times over the course of my career that I've used chasing OT and hazard pay as an excuse to, stay out on the line a little bit longer, do stuff when I was fatigued. And it's not the right thing, but shit, man, we're broke. And yeah, we got to survive the winter. I get it. That's a hard decision to make. It's like, do what's right. We're a high performance organization and we're a learning organization, a high performance learning organization. Yet we have to do some of these hard things and make those hard decisions, especially if it's the agency's bottom line or even your own. And that bottom line could be financial, health, mental health, all a litany of things, a huge list of stuff.
The process of learning our way through this was it was enlightening. There was so much that I just didn't know. Mm-hmm. And so, the quest for 1,000 hours overtime is a great example. It's when that question was first posed to our focus group participants, they really struggled with it. Like you kind of don't want to admit that. The idea that our people take on risk for money isn't.
But that's like the basis of our job. We're exchanging it. No, it doesn't feel good. But right. Even at the end of the day, whether you're chasing OT, our job is inherently dangerous. And it kind of goes into that. You're exchanging
and that's
risk
the goal.
For money.
It's to understand what are the conditions that are influencing people's decisions and actions. And what I like to say, and what I hope we do a good job saying in this chapter, is that while people live paycheck to paycheck, there is no wonder that they make decisions that put money in their pockets. It is no wonder. So, and this is part of the challenge is if you live paycheck to paycheck, you get that. Because you're living that.
Oh yeah.
But if through either chasing grades, getting paid better, or shoot, my wife is a great example. She's a money genius. Like she was financially stable much earlier than I was. So for those that don't live that anymore, it's really easy to forget. And to a great extent, this chapter is to remind those that no longer live that experience what it was like to live that way.
Especially when they get into like the GS Fantastic level.
Yep. And once you remember, it's like, oh yeah, I was there too. Every GS Fantastic was. So it's looking at it from another perspective. And it's acknowledging that as long as that condition exists, as long as people are living paycheck to paycheck, as long as people are thinking about the money instead of the work, we can't be surprised with where we're at. So if you want to change it, as Dan Pink says, and what we present in this chapter is pay people enough to take the question of money off the table so that they're focused on the work, not the money. And the challenge with our folks is time and time again, they make great, sound risk management decisions. And that's really what we try to highlight in is safety first a myth. And we shift the focus from the individual making the risk decision based on their financial conditions to a certain extent, the organization, what the organization says and what it's willing to do. We say no tree is worth a life, then send people into burning forests.
We're mopping up 500 feet interior
protection.
Yeah.
Yep. And then they're doing it.
And then there's a lot of outside pressures too, which the safety one, I'm breezing through it. I didn't get the chance to read this one in particular, but it kind of goes and alludes to the fact that we make decisions based off of outside pressures, even though we know it's kind of like, I'm just going to say it, sometimes it's a bullshit mission, like just like mopping up 500 feet in on a dead fire and you're just looking for something to do. It's like, why is that motivating us to go into a patch of fire weakened trees and mop up for days and days and days on end for a political smoke?
Right. And I think for me, one of the greatest experiences with this was recognizing that whether it's a district ranger, forest supervisor, regional forester, or the chief, I will never say that their risk is the same as the sawyer under a tree. But they're walking into governor's offices. They're walking into the fields of Congress. They're working in areas that I would never walk into. Right? The idea of a public meeting, that ain't me. That's terrifying to me. They walk this super important different fire line. And them being successful in resisting those political and social pressures so that you're not mopping up 500 feet interior, we need them to be great at their work. I don't need them to be a great Pulaski swinger. I need them to be in that public meeting. I need them to be in that meeting with the governor's office advocating for the Pulaski swingers.
Oh, yeah. And then educating the public so people understand what we do and why we don't fires just don't go out. We say it's out, but in the reality, I mean, the public messaging and the public education about how wildland fire kind of works, it's extraordinarily lacking. So those folks that are taking that enormous social and political risk and risk being basically crucified in front of the general public or fired, I mean, it's not the same risk as standing under that tree and falling a hazard tree by no means, but it's still a risk.
It's still a risk.
Still a risk.
And it's a battlefield that I don't understand. I think still it's been a bit, but I think I still got a pretty good feel. I know the world's changed. I don't know what it is to be an engine captain anymore. The stuff that engine captains are dealing with today is nothing like I was dealing with then. But we still have a similar language. We still walk the same line. And that provides a connection. I don't walk the same fire line as the chief does. But through this process, especially the socio-political pressures, real and perceived, the telling our story and communication leading to trust, I don't envy anybody walking those fire lines.
Absolutely not.
And I'm very deliberative in saying that. It is just a different fire line.
No, 100% it is. But I was going to point out something too between a lot of these chapters is a majority of them are all interconnected.
Yeah.
They all play off of each other. And they're like taking, like I was just looking through the safety first and myth. I mean, yeah, that's also tied into chapter 10. It's tied into chapter 11. It's 7. It's all of them really, maybe except for like chapter 1 and 14, but 14 could be argued again as well, because that's like continuing the story, right?
Yep. Yeah, it is all interconnected. And that was one of the challenges, is how do you tell a cohesive story that is consumable in bite-sized chunks? And it was a really kind of back and forth between how much do we repeat ourselves because they do connect, and how much we just point to other connections. They're absolutely interconnected. And that was really kind of the fun part about the focus groups, is the a focus group might be there to talk about fiscal incentives, another one to talk about fatalities and injuries, and another one to talk about society, but they're all talking about the same stuff, just from a different perspective.
Yeah. No, it all plays into each other. It's a fantastic job, really, because it's basically explaining the data-driven methodology behind explaining the culture behind wildland fire, whether it's your GS fantastic or all the way up in the WO as an ES position, all the way down to your GS3 rookie.
Yep.
And how they're all interconnected.
Well,
it's actually really, really good. It's really brilliantly done. So kudos.
It's a lot of great minds working towards that leader's intent that Sarah laid out.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, my focus is on the written document, but I can't downplay the data review, the combing through hundreds of learning reviews and FLAs and rapid lesson sharings, the research scientists that put their specialty to play that resulted in the HIPAI report, and really the cultural themes that we unpack here. All of this, I don't know, probably 30, maybe 40 people over the course of the years have contributed to this. It's and it is. When I was working with Ivan, I had the opportunity, he and I went and met Dr. Edgar Schein. And I had no idea who Schein was at the time. His book is like that thick, and I leafed through it. I was a horrible student, and I never really dug into it. But
we swing axes.
One of the things
so I was swinging
right
to Pulaski's.
Yep. But Schein is a brilliant guy with culture. And one of the things that he taught me was that all too often we just say, well, it's culture, and we shrug our shoulders as if there's nothing we can do about it. But every one of us, Schein teaches that leadership's response to events shapes culture. So what you do in response to events really matters. But I've expanded that a little bit over the years, recognizing that the guy sitting in the back seat, their response to events is going to shape culture on my crew too. It's not just me. Every one of us have a role to play in this. And so if we respond to this as an event, what do you mean safety first is a myth? And then we talk about it, then we're getting somewhere.
Well, I even think it's more than that, actually. I mean, I looking at over the course of the last 4 years of doing this podcast and talking with people, there's not a lot of institutional trust with the boots on the ground. There's not. And I'll be the first one to say that. And boldly enough, with this meta review, you call yourselves out and hold yourselves accountable as an agency. Bold move. I don't think a lot of people know about this, because that's like half the problem of changing that culture that you're talking about, is understanding why we've gotten to this state in the first place over the last 10 years or 20 years. It's even longer than that. Because this is taking a lot of stuff from the past.
Yeah, you're right. It does take a lot of stuff from the past. And we kind of scrolled down, but if you check out the website, I can't understate the importance of the message from J. LaPaul Rivera and Cindy West. So it took over a year. The meta review was done, and we sent it off to leadership for approval. And it took over a year to get to release date. And over the course of that year, I kind of lost hope. I I was at best expecting them to come back and say, you need to delete this, and this. And a great one in the mental health and suicide, a call to action chapter, there's a focus group statement where an individual said that people are committing suicide because they aren't getting the help that they need through OWCP. I mean, that's a compelling statement.
And it's not too
I
far
expected. Well, that's just it. Is I expected leadership to say, you can't say that. You got to delete that. But it's in there.
Oh yeah.
They didn't say that.
And
it took time to get it out. But ultimately, I didn't release it. I was advised, just leak it. Just leak it out there. But no. Leadership saying, yes, we are going to share this experience with everybody. That's how you build trust. One of the ways. Now, we still have a long way to go. I'm not saying that we're there. But trust is a product of what?
There's a lot of things that go into that. Dialogue, trust. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into trust and what builds trust. There's leadership, there's sacrifice, there's dialogue, there's asking the hard questions. And I'm just, after reviewing this thing, I'm very surprised that you got basically carte blanche to say all the quiet parts out loud, which is cool. I mean, yeah, it's not as graphic as the quiet parts out loud, like we kind of talk about on the line per se, and like a human to human interaction, or when we're bored out in the middle of the Nevada desert mopping up some BS fire. But it's written down in a way, and it's recorded in a way where it's easily digestible, but also calling out some of the glaring issues that our culture faces and holding yourselves accountable as an agency, but also holding the individual part of that agency accountable as well. You have the power to change things.
Every one of us. Absolutely. Every one of us. If it had been either IOL or research or leadership saying, here is the meta review and here's the list of recommendations and this is what we're going to do to fix this. Yeah, no, this stuff isn't like that.
Yeah, it might not have even happened.
Right. Yeah.
I will say that this is going to, I think that this episode right here, this is going to have multiple parts, because we're just going over like a overview, a broad overview, but a lot of this stuff is so complex. And I would love to see if we can go into some of these individual chapters with some of the subject matter experts that assisted on writing these chapters and what they've identified. Do you think we can do that and make a couple of parts? Like, I really, really want to talk about, I really, really want to talk about the mental health one, the quest for 1,000 hours. And there's a few of them that I really want to take a deep dive into.
So I'll say a couple things. So the website itself is just the first part. What comes next is really the important piece, and that is the dialogues about these things. So what we're currently doing is every month, third Wednesday of each month, we hold a meta review webinar, and we do a different chapter each month. And those webinars are open to everybody. I have GS, I don't know what the lowest level is, the 5, 6s, somewhere in there, all the way up to Washington office senior leaders attending these things. I even had a congressional staffer at the last one. Like, this is all about coming together and talking about these things. So these are open to everybody. So extend that invite to every one of your audience, including yourself. Join those webinars, but also we're more than willing to come and talk about them anywhere. But here's one of the things that I'll say is, take a look at a chapter, take a look at the challenge, And I hope you'll realize that you don't need me, that you need you and your peers and those that you lead and those that you follow to talk about this stuff. Come up with the ideas and then engage. You guys have the solutions to this, not research and development. You, wherever you're sitting in the organization, those closest to the work often have the best ideas on how to improve that work. That is a foundational philosophy of learning in this organization. But we got to live that.
And not the truth. But it's hard. I get it. I mean, it's the time alone that's required to, dedicate something like this. It sucks because a lot of us are still seasonals. And I mean, during the winter, the last thing we want to do is do something like this because we're not, one, we're not getting paid for it. And two, you probably just want to chill and not like really, even if you're still on duty, you just want to like go do your pile burning and then just like relax. Just like in the 1,000 hours, the quest for 1,000-hour overtime season.
Time for reflection is a foundational building block of learning and a learning organization. Time for reflection is finite. And even if we could seal back a few scraps of time, how will you use that time? And if you use that time to just take a breath, also necessary first thing, recover, breathe, and then use that time to do the other stuff that's on your plate a little bit better and a little bit quicker. Great. You need to do that. And I know that learning's down the way a little bit, but if we are going to live as a learning organization, that's our task. Create the time for learning, for engagement, for dialogue. And hopefully, and this is the tricky part, through that engagement, your life will get better. It is worth it.
Oh, 100%. I do have a question for you, though, regarding the people that want to get involved with the meta review and do these webinars and stuff. So there's an obvious fear factor. There's a fear factor of reprisal. There's a fear factor of being judged by your peers. There's a huge list of this stuff, right? So as far as saying like some of the quiet parts out loud, and I mean, you probably have heard it all during this whole like development process, right? You probably heard some pretty terrifying stuff. Well, I know that distrust with the institution is alive and well, especially in the fear of reprisal thing. So what do you have to say to the folks that are listening to this that would like to get involved and tell those hard stories, either privately or publicly? How do we ensure their protection? Because that's going to be a big, big barrier to people being involved, wanting to be involved.
And it's a great question. So there's a couple different ways to approach this. So one of the things that we do in focus groups is, in order to participate in a live interpersonal focus group, you do extend your trust to the people in the room. Names in the review, you'll see that quotes are never attributed by name, by position only, so that you get the perspective. IOL makes that commitment to protect your thoughts, and that's in a focus group. So that's a way that we do it. If that is still a bridge too far, and I get it, it is for many. It was for me in a lot of ways. One-on-one interviews are absolutely available. Attend a meta review webinar and lurk. The breakout rooms are not recorded. We record the intro piece, but not the breakout rooms. So yeah, you got to trust the people that are in the breakout room, and you'll have to do your own internal risk assessment. You'll look at the names and see, okay, that person's here, I can't trust. But probably the greatest thing I would say, and I steal this from Brene Brown. She says that vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. So know what your vulnerability boundaries are. And if you're in a room where you can't cross that boundary, even if it's your honest truth, then find another way to speak that honest truth. If it's one-on-one with me, great. If it's one-on-one with one of the other IOL employees, fantastic. But if it's with Brandon on the podcast or somewhere else, whatever it takes, find a way to share that. With the focus groups, I say that everyone in the wildfire system is one invitation away from participation. But you do have to conduct your own kind of social and psychological safety risk assessment. And if you're not safe, don't. But find a way to get safe and do.
Yeah. And, bringing it back to like the same conversation, same topic, it's even with third parties. I mean, I know a lot of folks, and it's not just my podcast. There's a lot of folks out there that have been on different third party podcasts outside the agency. And the thing that sucks is like, I have to have this disclaimer in this talk with folks that don't have permission. They're kind of begging for forgiveness to tell their story, to speak their truths. And it's like, I can't protect you. So you have to, like you said, find a way to say the quiet parts out loud without getting your ass in a crack, so to speak. So, I mean, it's hard.
I said it a little earlier that I was advised to just leak the meta review. And I say advised, but it was really a friend just send it out. Just send it out. What are they going to do to you? Just send it out. But it was so important to me for trust, for leadership to say, yes, we are going to share this with everyone. Not just with the organization, but with our interagency partners and the public.
It's a public thing too. Yeah.
It's wide open. Yep. And I've had several people ask, well, isn't this sharing your dirty laundry? And my answer is, yeah, you got to pull dirty laundry out of the closet to deal with it.
It makes us human.
Right. It's human. Yeah. And that's the beauty of these topics. And also the real challenge is these are human, never ending. They transcend time. Like, how long have we as a culture been dealing with suicide?
Forever.
It wasn't that long ago. We didn't even bury them in the same cemetery as everybody else. But now, maybe we're approaching it differently. And man, talk about standing on shoulders of giants. 20 years of war has forced this country to address the impacts in suicide. And we're learning a ton from them. I wish we, of course, didn't have that resource to learn from, but we do. And I'd like to think that the conversation, well, I know the conversation today is very different than 10 years ago. And 10 years from now, the conversation is going to be even further along.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Will we have the nut cracked? I hope so. But it's human. Will we ever figure out this human thing? I don't know.
Well, the day we do is probably this time we should stop trying. So hopefully we don't figure out the human experience and what the meaning of life is, because, if I knew everything, I wouldn't want to be a part of it. Sorry. It sounds kind of cold and, don't mean to tie it into the suicide thing, but like, what's the point of life if you know everything about it?
Right. It's the foundation beyond all of this and kind of putting the punchline or the secret out to your audience is people often ask, where are the recommendations? What do we just need to do? Well, the whole thing is a recommendation. And the recommendation is talk about it. Talk about his safety first of myth. Talk about socio-political pressures. Talk about, and this is the tricky one, because a lot of us aren't ready to talk about the heavy mental health and suicide topics that are necessary. So we got to do the work to get ready. That chapter in particular really, but all of them. I mean, just by skillfully we can address this, but without that skill, we can cause harm. So Don't go into these dialogues flippantly. Do your homework. Have a plan. But silence doesn't serve us.
No.
It's kind of how we got here.
And like you're saying, man, I mean, some of these chapters are heavy and a lot of them come with trigger warnings as well, which is needed. I mean, we need to have those things. I mean, we're going to be talking about some heavy stuff in here and we're going to be reading and learning about these heavy topics. But some of it's
one of my favorite authors, Neil Gaiman, has something really cool to say about trigger warnings. He hates them. And I understand their necessity, and so does he. But his position is that stories should move us.
Yes.
It's in the movement that we work our way through.
He's not
wrong. So yes, trigger warning. But it should move us. It has to move us.
Yeah. Tying the emotional and the human component into all of this stuff of why we operate the way we do, how we operate as a culture. I mean, it's all pretty much laid out there. I mean, it's a little bit, I mean, it's condensed. Don't get me wrong. It's an abridged version of the human condition, but for the most part, it's all on there. And I'm actually rather impressed. And I want to say thank you to you and everybody involved with creating this because it needs to be talked about. It does.
So I've been grinding this week on Meta Review 2.0, the next one. And if we're still talking about the same stuff, okay, it just means we have more work to do. But I trust we will be talking about different stuff as well. So dig into this one, have the dialogues, prove me wrong, make the next Meta Review about something completely different. I'd be thoroughly pleased about that. But that's another unreasonable expectation.
It just takes time. Bring it back to the beginning of this. Time we don't have. Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't mind, I'd throw a suggestion out there. I would like to see a little bit more expansion on like substances and like self-medication, drinking, all that stuff. It's kind of brushed upon, but do a whole chapter on that. That'd be an interesting one.
Chapter on that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then, well, I mean, we're going to get rolling to the end of the episode. I am running out of time, but I would love to have you back on the show. Maybe we can do some live or something like that. And then we can go into some of these individual chapters, as third party, not as like the webinar. I think that'd be cool. I think if we expanded on some of these with some of the folks involved, if they're willing, I would love to have that and kind of go down that path.
Absolutely. It's a sign of increasing trust. The more and more people I talk to, the more willing they are. I'd like to think it's a sign of increasing trust. It might be something else, so I'll say that. But the more people I talk to, the more willing they are to have their names attached to their positions. And I don't mean position like job. I mean what they think. Mm-hmm. So we on the website, you'll see a couple focus group participants that were willing to be interviewed, and they share their names in there. Tom Taylor, Persephone Whalen, Ken Watkins, Kim Lightly, Jason Kiken, and Ted Adams. So you can hear a little bit from those people in their words in those interviews. And that's on the website. But I'd be more than willing to reach out to some of our focus group participants, see if they'd be willing to do this. And we'll see where we go.
Love it, man. And yeah, I really can't wait to see what's next. This is going to be cool. And this is all stuff that's, part of our culture and it needs to be addressed. And if we don't talk about it and we don't understand it, then how the hell are we going to change it? So just want to say once again, thank you to you and everybody involved in putting this together. And we'll get some more information on it as well. But as far as
my pleasure to represent that group, a lot of great people have been involved in this.
Hell yeah. And then as far as where to find all this stuff, I mean, where do we go?
So the Meta Review has a forward-facing website. You don't need to be a Forest Service employee. So I think we can share that link in the show notes. I'd also like to share a link to a follow-on project to this called the Wildfire Histo Map. I think your audience would dig that. we could talk about that next time too, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's the website's the best, but what I would really suggest is sign up for the mailing list. And it's in the meta review final chapter challenge. You'll see the link there, and I'll get that link for you in the show notes as well. But sign up for the mailing list. You don't have to be a Forest Service employee, and you'll get. And I don't spam you. I don't sell your email address, but sign up for that mailing address, and you'll hear about all things meta review.
Perfect.
Including, I hope. Never thought I'd say this, but meta review 2.
The 2.0.
It's on the horizon.
Sweet. Yep. Well, cool, man.
My boss is probably going to kill me for saying that in public, but
too late now.
It's true.
It's out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, as far as you, I mean, do you want to throw any of your information out in the show notes too? I mean, you don't have to say it out loud. I mean, do not give out your phone number.
Yep.
The last person that did that just had to change their phone number. So, but yeah, how do we get a hold of you?
Yep. I could definitely put my email address in the show notes. And again, I'm in a privileged position where talking to people about this stuff is my work. So never hesitate. Reach out. We'll arrange a time. We'll chat.
Perfect. And then last but not least, before we take off, I always give the opportunity for our guest. Really, you're the host, actually. I'm just a facilitator asking dumb questions. Let's be honest here. But I always give the opportunity for you to give a shout out to some homies, heroes, mentors. What do you got for us?
Oh, man. I've mentioned several of them. It's a long list. So Jim Savelin, Ivan Poplity were formative in this. Jim Gum, my current boss now, was there with Tom's family too. And at the time, I didn't know Jim. He was a public affairs officer, and you can imagine how that looked to me at the time. But Jim knows what it's like to lose a son. He was the right person to be with Tom's family, and he's taught me so much about everything, this work, being a human. Bob Bell is by far, I owe him so much. Chris Orr, it's a long list. It's a long list. The IOL crew in general, it's a unique collection of people that want to do some really brain bending but important work. And so in the future, keep your eye open for details to the group. We're getting bigger. We call them our catch and release program, where people come in, spend 120 days with us. We suck their brains dry and then send them back out into the wild. Yeah, hopefully we've inspired some interest in that, because we'd love to share what we do with people.
Sounds like one hell of a winter job too. Winter work, man.
That's right. Yep.
Well, cool. Well, Ben, I just want to say thank you once again for being on the show and kind of sharing the general overview of what the meta review is going to be and what it is and where it's going in the future. And then honestly, I really do think that these stories and this information has the power to change what the perceptions and also how we go about things in the future, as far as culture, as far as operations, as far as all that stuff, to making us human and wildland firefighting humans at that. So just want to say thank you, man. This is awesome. And we'll get you back on the show.
My pleasure. Glad to do it.
Right on, dude. Everybody, I hope you check out the meta review. I just Google searched it. It's easy. Forest Service or USDA meta review. It'll pull up the first link. It's actually right there. So SEO is good. You don't have to search for it or dig, but check it out. And yeah, we'll put some things in the show notes so we can get a hold of Ben here. And if you want to be involved with the next iteration, or if you want to do some discussions, we'll get you linked up to the proper people. So
even if you think we're crazy, we're open to hearing that too.
You guys are nuts. Oh man.
We're in good company.
Yes. We're all a little couple screws loose at least. So, well, Ben, thank you so much. Appreciate it, man. We'll get you on the next time. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. And boom, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of the Anchor Point Podcast is in the books with our good friend, Ben Iverson. Ben, thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you for taking on this monumental project. And you're basically throwing a lot of experience that you've had, especially with the past events that you've witnessed, into this meta review process. And I deeply appreciate that. It's only going to make our culture a little bit more aware of like the societal norms, the reasons why we do certain things, leadership blocks. I mean, the list goes on, man. It's crazy. And I really honestly hope that this overall look from the top level down and then back up with the meta review improves some of our safety in the field and gives us a good deep insight of why wildland firefighters do the things they do, why these cultural norms are so just ingrained within our society, and it's only going to make us safer in the long run. So yeah, this whole thing is a big deep dive into wildfire culture. And if you want to get involved, definitely hit up Ben. I'll put some contact information in the show notes. And get involved, because the only way we're going to learn about ourselves is, well, learning about ourselves. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, this whole meta review, it's on the Forest Service website, and all you have to do is, type in a Google search for meta review and it'll pull it up. The first 3 chapters takes a look back over some major events. The chapters 4 through 11, it's going to be the highlight of the big 8, using air quotes here. And that's going to be the 8 biggest challenges within the wildfire system, the wildland fire system. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's one I found particularly fascinating in there was the safety first culture being a total myth. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Anyways, what I'm saying is this is a pretty cool thought experiment and you might learn something out of it. So Ben, once again, thank you for being on the show. Appreciate it, man. As for the rest of you, well, I hope everybody's doing well. And I hope that something picks up, because probably people are going a little bit stir crazy, but we'll see what the future has in store for all of us. I know that Canada's ripping off like it has been, but hey, at the lower 48, eventually we'll pop off. So keep it together out there and don't get complacent. Special shout out to our sponsors. We've got Mystery Ranch, purveyors of the finest damn packs in the wildland fire game, plus more. If you want to find out more about the Mystery Ranch Backbone series, go over to www.mysteryranch.com and check it out. We've got Hotshot Brewery, kick-ass coffee for a kick-ass cause. A portion of the proceeds will always go back to the Wildland Firefighter Foundation. Go over to www.hotshotbrewing.com to find out more. We've got the Ass Man, Mr. Booze himself, with the Ass Movement. Go over to www.thefirewild.com and check out the Ass Movement for all your poo-bearing propaganda. And last but not least, we've got the Smoky Generation, aka Wildfire Experience. Bethany, you have a kick-ass organization over there. Keep it up. Y'all know the drill. Stay safe, stay savage. Peace.